1783. A nun, a forgery, and a public execution, and the strange chain of events which led to ghastly goings-on here at Bank Station on the London Underground. It was at this church, St Helens, in the late 1700s, that Sister Sarah Whitehead worked and prayed. She lived a reasonably normal life, working with nuns from the nearby convent of St Helens, in the hospice, and also at the convent school as a teacher of English. Sister Sarah was a kind, normal woman whose family had lived in London for many generations. Unfortunately, in 1775, both her parents died, leaving Sarah and brother Philip Whitehead to fend for themselves. Sister Sarah joined the convent of St Helens, leaving brother Philip to go and look for work in the great city. Sarah tried to help him as best she could, but she had little money and spent all of her time teaching and helping the sick. This is where the convent of St Helens used to stand. It was partially destroyed during the war, and these gardens were built on the site in the late 50s. Sister Sarah's brother, Philip, went to school in the East End of London, in Whitechapel. After his parents died at age 15, he left school and began work in a marketplace whilst living in a hostel that Sister Sarah had found for him. It was less than a year before his talents were noticed, and he was employed as an apprentice at the Bank of England. Until he was 20, Philip worked as an errand boy, and during this time he learned a lot about the bank and its operations. On the occasion of his 20th birthday, he was promoted to cashier and lived in a small flat above a cobbler's shop on Liverpool Street, just across the road from the station. The pay was enough to keep Philip alive and out of trouble. Every day, Sister Sarah would meet Philip outside the bank, and they would go to church to pray together. Then, Philip would leave, go to his room until the next working day, while Sister Sarah worked through the night at the hospice. In 1782, after 7 years working at the bank, Philip was arrested for forging banknotes from the stolen copper plates used to make them. He'd had the plates copied, sold them on, and made quite a bit of money for himself. Despite this, he continued to live in his one room, seemingly barely scraping by. In fact, he'd been biding his time, planning to donate the money he'd stolen to his sister's convent. He had hidden the money somewhere secret, a safe place, still not known to this day. Then, in 1783, he was taken from Newgate Prison and taken here to Tyburn Road, now Oxford Street, where he was to be executed by hanging. He was among the last to be hung here, on the Tyburn Triple Tree, gallows 18 feet high and large enough to hang 8 men at any one time. Execution Day was known as Tyburn Fair and was seen as an excuse for rowdiness, merriment and mob violence. Sister Sarah did not take Philip's execution at all well. In fact, she stopped her English classes at the convent and withdrew from her fellow nuns at the church. Every day she would wait for Philip outside the Bank of England, and she did this for 40 years, until she finally died of the tuberculosis that was rife at the time. She was buried here, grounds that were changed when Bank Station opened in 1890. It wasn't until some workmen disrupted some old tunnels in the station in the early 20th century that strange things really began to happen at Bank. The workmen reported a strange presence, and several passengers claimed to have seen a ghostly apparition as the train sped through the station as it was closed one weekend. Then, in 1940, during a bombing raid, several Londoners who were using the platform as shelter saw a ghostly nun with black robes, pale skin and dark eyes wandering slowly up and down the platform. Further sightings occurred in the 1960s, when a tourist and a railway worker were catching the last train home of the evening. As they boarded an empty carriage, the nun ran in, pushed them over, looked around and ran out again, then disappeared down the platform. It was in 1983 though, nearly 200 years exactly to the anniversary of Philip Whitehead's execution, that the most famous sighting of the Black Nun took place. It was late November, approaching 11:30, when a busy passageway leading from Bank Northern Line to Bank Central was filled with sobs as the ghostly nun floated past a dozen shocked onlookers. The nun with her hands in her face lifted her head and looked at them, then disappeared from a nearby sealed door. That was the last time the Black Nun was seen at Bank Station, nearly 20 years ago. Was she Sister Sarah Whitehead? The sighting on the anniversary of her brother's death could not just be mere coincidence. And being this close to the Bank of England, where he worked and near to where she was laid to rest, all point to the same truth. Will she be seen again? And if so, who will encounter her ghostly lingering?